Today, we were joining with Tommy Grisafi and Brian Basting from Advanced Trading. Welcome to the show. How are you guys?
Doing well, my friend. Great to be here.
Doing good. Thanks for having me today.
Start with Tommy. Let's start our conversation with the corn markets for right now with the acreage report in World Agricultural Start with Tommy. Let's start our conversation with the corn markets for right now with the acreage report in World Agricultural Supply Report.
Yeah, excellent. Corn market right now is really going through an interesting time where we have too much corn, not only on the American level, but on the world level. There's Brian will add to it, but the second crop, safrinha crops hitting in, and we just have a lot of everything in the world. I think it was almost 2 years ago today, and Brian could check my math on this, that corn was 808 a bushel.
Yeah.
We are now 404 a bushel. And doggone it, I hate to say it, half off sale in corn. And that is because the world farmer is great and technology is just improving. So we will have a USDA report. And for friends and family listening to this show, I don't know that there'll be any big surprises tomorrow. I think the big surprise has already happened with the USDA report and with the big rains that came through, those hurricane rains, pretty much erasing the drought on the Eastern Belt. Drought maps are out today. I'll grab that one real quick, Bri.
Sure.
For the most part, pretty good. But I will say this, our friends up in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota are extremely worried about if the crops will finish in time with just a lack of overall heat. So there's enough good beans out there to, there's plenty of beans in old crop carryout. There's plenty of beans in South America. We're growing a bean crop here. We just had all that moisture, but it's really important to remember that, and Brian's old enough to remember this, so am I. I've seen years where we've had incredible corn crops and ruined the bean crop in the month of August. And we're halfway through July here, coming up in a few days. So it's getting easier to say there will be corn in America. Until we have that August weather, there's still weather risk and premium that could be added here to the beans.
Brian, could you explain to our listeners about these reports on the corn yields for right now?
The corn yield that the trade is looking at today, Cesar, is quite high. There are private estimates out there who are projecting over 180 bushels per acre nationwide. That would be a new record. Last year was a record, I believe, at 177. And what I'd remind your listeners is that each year is different, but we remember how much stress the corn was under last year. And then the weather changed in July and August, and we ended up with some surprisingly good corn yields, particularly in the Eastern Corn Belt. This year, we're not putting a tremendous amount of stress on a large percentage of the crop. I don't want to ignore by any means the excess rain that some of those folks in South Central, Southwest Minnesota, Southeast South Dakota, parts of Northwest Iowa have been under. We're under here recently. And it's not ideal. It's not perfect everywhere. It never is. But having said that, the crop condition ratings here for mid-July, approaching mid-July, as Tommy said a second ago, and the crop being farther along with pollination, we aren't seeing widespread issues at the moment for corn. So the corn yield that we're hearing in many cases is even above the USDA yield. At the moment, the USDA is just using a trend yield for their forecast. They came out here in June, the USDA did at 181. That's a big yield. That would be a record yield, 181. Again, last year's record is 177.3. But regardless, at this time, Cesar, the market is building in some expectations for high yields. And I think what the market learned from last year, perhaps, was that in 2024, the genetics, we got the best producers in the world. Your listeners are the best producers in the world, and they're also adopting the best genetics in the world. And now we're getting some favorable trends from Mother Nature, as it were, with rainfall and temperatures. So the yields that we're hearing are record yields at the moment. However, as Tommy said a moment ago, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, even for corn. As Tommy said, critical month is August, but we've still got a ways to go yet. I would guess that the pollination for next Sunday nationwide on corn would be somewhere around, I would say 35 to 40%. That means well over half the crop still is yet to pollinate. So, but for the moment, yields are projected. The market's penciling in some record yields.
What is the yields for right now in the Midwest and Central Illinois?
I'll let you grab that, Brian.
The yields, Central Illinois at this point, Cesar, we really had some beneficial rains from the remnant of Hurricane Beryl. Probably some areas south and east of Central Illinois, maybe down towards that Champaign, Urbana, and further south and east from there, maybe even had too much in some cases, but 3 to 4 inches. But a lot of Central Illinois from here, a little bit north. I'm talking Bloomington Normal, a little bit north and east had 1 to 2 inches. Nearly ideal rainfall for this time of year. So for Central Illinois at this point, I would say, Cesar, we're looking at definitely the potential for record yields. Again, it's not to say we still have a ways to go. We got the entire grain fill period, of course, after this pollination is completed. And we've got a lot of variables out there. We just never know what kind of variables can sneak up on us. But for the moment, this rain came at just the right time because, again, going back to Tommy's initial comments, if you looked at the 30-day precip prior to this week's rain, we were getting dry in Central Illinois. The topsoil moisture especially was getting dry. I wouldn't say necessarily the subsoil moisture was real dry, but the topsoil moisture was dry. In some areas, the corn was I wouldn't say suffering, but it was starting to roll a little bit. But these rains came just at the right time, and so I'd say the yield potential in Central Illinois at this time, Cesar, is quite high.
Tommy, what is going on in North Dakota about the weather?
That's a great question. Talked to a lot of North Dakota clients today, and they are excited that they're having 80s, in some cases 90 degrees. Many clients were dramatically affected with hail, some severe hail damage, in particular some farms, and too much moisture, which has been a theme of North Dakota over the last 30 years. We did have a drought in 21. But other than that, more crops have been ruined from excess moisture in the Dakotas, both north and south. So they got the crop in time, but now too much moisture really creating some problems. We'll see if we can get the heat units to finish up that crop up there.
How was the spring wheat?
Oh, great question. I'm going to put spring wheat down for a record crop, not only in North Dakota, but in Canada. And I think Brian helps with those numbers every Monday when we have crop progress. A whopper of a spring wheat crop. What do you think, Brian?
Oh, you're spot on, Tommy. Everything that we've picked up in terms of crop condition ratings from USDA, anecdotal reports from up north, at the moment, it certainly has the potential to be a record crop. The crop condition ratings, for example, are 75% good to excellent for spring wheat as of Sunday. And I believe last year was around 47%, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in the high 40s, but it was way below where it is this year. Now, again, this crop is not finished either, but at the moment, I agree completely with Tommy at this point, Cesar, that this crop has gotten nice, timely rainfall. At this point, I think the spring wheat being reflected in the market too, at this point, making some contract lows recently, has the potential to be the best ever in terms of yield.
Can you give us insight of Dakotas with the weather and crop conditions?
Maybe look at the fall crops, Tommy. I'll throw that back to you.
Yeah, what was the question? Repeat it back to me, Brian. I didn't hear it in traffic. Just tell me what the question was, Brian. I'll answer it.
Looking at North Dakota, and I'll fill in the blank and say the fall crops, Tommy, in terms of corn and beans up in that area.
Yeah. If we can get decent weather, we could have some decent crops up there. Definitely behind in heat. We have plenty of moisture. There's probably enough moisture. If it didn't rain in North Dakota again, I think they'd have a decent crop up there. That's what they could do with mild temperatures and all the moisture they have. So yeah, a couple other things to keep in mind in North Dakota. You have sugar beets, over 500,000 acres of sugar beets. Not something we talk about a lot, but very important to the Red River Valley. Edible beans do not like wet feet, and barley does not like getting wet. Barley, kind of in that wheat family, does not do well at all with excess moisture. I believe, Brian, when it barley heads, it starts to sprout if it sits out there with too much moisture. So if I'm saying anything not right, shore me up there. But there's potential in Dakotas, but what's ruined through too much moisture. And you can only flood a field one time. I mean, if you flood a field and you ruin it, you're not going to ruin that same low spot over and over. And we'll see what we have when the combines roll. About, what do you think, Bri? 30 days till wheat harvest in Dakotas?
It sure feels that way, Tommy. Maybe stretch that into the last half of August, but definitely we're on target for a big harvest, and no signs of any type of delays or any type of issues to date anyway. Obviously, we want to keep an eye on things like potential for fusarium as we get further closer to the end here, and we don't want to have any quality issues with too much rain. But you hit the nail on the head. The only issue that I heard of when I talked with some folks recently was exactly what you just said: the lack of grow into your units. And it sounds like you're going to get quite warm up there, moving into next week, especially.
Do you see impacting the flooding in North Dakota?
Go ahead, Brian.
I think Cesar was asking about the flooding in North Dakota, Tommy. What
Yeah,
maybe any acreage loss there, or prevent plant or anything like that?
Yeah, there were some people who didn't get some stuff planted. There were some things that happened there that weren't good. We will find out. Right now the USDA is coming out with higher acreage numbers. That's going to affect us tomorrow, everyone. When we have that USDA report, they're going to work with those new numbers. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bri. And they're going to show some big ending stocks in the end. Come JFM, January, February, March, I think the crops might not quite be as big as we think, with PP and variability within crops. But what I've learned in my career in the grain industry is, then no one wants to hear this, is rain makes grain. And for all the fields that are flooded, what's not flooded will be of really high quality, big bushel grain. Now, I give an example to 2023, where the whole state of Iowa was in pretty severe drought and they grew an average crop. I could only imagine how much corn Iowa could have grown last year with adequate moisture. You throw in the moisture that just came through the Midwest with this storm, adding it to the Eastern belt, and I think we're set up for really big bushels. And as Brian taught me when I was a young broker at Advanced Trading, we're in the bushel business, and we need to help people market big bushels, not pretend that the crop's not there. get ready for big bushels in the fall.
What is your sources for Brazil's soybean production from December? Brian.
The CONAB is a respected Brazil supply company that produces or that generates production estimates, Caesar. They come out once a month. They came out this morning and they put the soybean crop a little bit smaller, about 147.3, as I recall, 147.4 compared to what they had last month. Now, the interesting part of that is that the USDA in June had Brazil soybeans at 153. So there's a feeling that that number is going to come down. It'll be reduced tomorrow from the USDA because they had a lot of flooding in the far southern state in Brazil of Rio Grande do Sul. So that number is going to come down. I doubt it would come down all the way to 147, but USDA may trim that a little bit tomorrow by 1 or 2 million tons. Historically, Caesar, the USDA is conservative in their production estimates. We'll see over time if they do migrate closer to where CONAB is. But here's the thing I'd share with your listeners. Last year, Brazil raised a record soybean crop. It was about 163, 164 million tons. I'll put that in bushels. That would be about, oh my goodness, close to 6 billion bushels. And obviously we grow 4.2, 4.3 here in the US. So Brazil is blown by the US. Even though that crop number is coming down this year from 163, 164 down to 150, 148, whatever it may end up being, that would still be the second largest bean crop ever that Brazil's ever harvested. So 2 points to that, Caesar, is that they are exporting beans as we speak from Brazil. It probably their program of exporting beans probably won't last as long this year as it did last year, simply because they don't have the volume of beans that they had last year. However, the other side of that coin is that we also don't have much demand yet from China. We finally saw China come in here with a new crop bean purchase from the U.S. this week. But China, if Brazil has beans available for the next month or two, they're probably going to continue to, if the beans are cheaper from Brazil, we'll source them from Brazil. So, but speaking specifically to your question, Caesar, the crop in Brazil is down. It's a smaller crop than last year, but it's not a disaster. It's not a drought, widespread drought. The issue that Brazil had was some late season flooding, tremendous catastrophic flooding in one key state. And that's why I think the number is going to come down a little bit tomorrow, but they've still got a lot of potential to be a competitor with U.S. bean exports for a couple more months yet.
How is the soybean crop in Brazil and Argentina for their harvest season for them?
I'll go ahead and field that one, Tommy. They have just completed the soybean harvest in Argentina, Caesar. It's much bigger, larger than last year. The market is looking around 50 million tons. Argentina had a drought last year for their soybean crop. Trying to think off the top of my head, I want to say it was like 37 million tons. But the final number was well below last year. So what we saw a year ago was that the smaller crop in Argentina opened up a market for the U.S. soybean meal. I don't think with the soybean crop so much larger here in Argentina that we're going to have that opportunity here in the U.S. this year for those soybean meal sales that we had last year. So the combined production from Brazil and Argentina this year, I would, thinking off the top of my head, it's pretty close to where it was last year. But the difference is that Brazil is lower and Argentina is higher. And soybean meal is a big, so Argentina is the largest soybean meal exporter in the world. So that's going to be an issue here moving forward into 24, 25 in terms of last year, we had a large domestic soybean crush. Caesar, one of the reasons we did is because we were crushing for soybean meal last year because the soybean meal market was so strong. I don't see that happening here in 24, 25. So that's going to be something that may weigh on the market too going forward, but that's on the demand side again. But that's my thoughts on the South American soybean crops. Combined, pretty close production to last year.
How is the cattle markets for beef demand for last week, Tommy?
Yeah, cattle have been holding up there pretty good. We had a little sell-off this week, but we recovered some today. We are through that 4th of July holiday where we start to see demand start to go down. People have saved money for back to school and all that other stuff. The big demand season, I think almost as big as anything, maybe the only thing bigger, Brian, than 4th of July might be Thanksgiving or Christmas when we go to the grocers.
Mm.
And something else that's great for demand too. Also, the Super Bowl is by far the biggest demand day for chicken. But we're through that summer grilling season. We still have 6 more weeks left of summer, maybe 7. But we'll see. Typically, we start to come down this time of year. We'll see how things hold up. Prices have been high for a long time. I do have a couple questions I don't have answers to. Can this consumer, will they tolerate continually buying high price beef? Maybe they'll stay away from the fancy cuts and we'll move more to a ground beef society where we could all afford a pound of ground beef, but maybe won't be eating ribeyes. But time will tell. We have election in about 100 days, and there could be a lot of volatility in the outside markets moving into that.
Do you have any concerns about the bird flu?
Brian, you want to grab that? I'm pretty okay with the bird flu. It seems like it's passed.
Yeah. Anytime you talk about a wild card, Cesar, you got to address bird flu. It's a big deal. It might fall into the same, it would fall into the same category of a black swan event, such as the mad cow disease that we had. It would be 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now, here in the U.S. But for the moment, I agree with Tommy. It seems like for the moment, that major concern is past. But those issues are always out there in the meats. I know a few years ago there was a big issue in China with their pork, with their hog herds, where they had to have massive liquidation. So, but bird flu for the moment is taken on the back seat. It's interesting to watch those events though, because it can be flying under the radar for a while, as it were, and then it pops up and it becomes an issue overnight. So we always encourage producers in risk management to be aware of those black swan events that can happen. Obviously, in this case, it would be most devastating, for example, to a corn slash soybean producer if you would have to have some mass liquidation, for example, of the poultry sector due to bird flu. A sector that's already struggling, as Tommy and I have been talking about so much here under the weight of crop supply for the most part. But for the most part, I've not heard any major concerns lately on the bird flu side.
Do you have any final thoughts, or re-edited?
No, I just want to say thanks for everyone listening, and could be some fireworks here coming in the election. As my friend Brian said, just because prices are down today doesn't mean they'll stay there forever. The funds are really short. At some point, they'll cover, and we can see an explosive rally. We are in a bear market, and bear markets are famous for explosive, short covering rallies. Keep an eye out for a little pop here in the markets.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Cesar. I really want to underscore what Tommy said is spot on, that in a risk management environment, for example, at these lower levels, I'd be strongly encouraging end users to be getting some coverage, those looking to purchase soybeans and or soybean meal, in this case for corn, for feeding, or in this case, obviously for corn, for usage in the industrial use or feeding. But the same concepts of risk management apply in terms of flexibility, Cesar, that if you've made a sale, for example, or maybe need to make a sale here of new crop at harvest, or whatever the case may be, for reasons, specific reasons. You want to be flexible. You want to give yourself an opportunity to be a participant when the market rebounds. No one knows when that's going to happen, but it will happen eventually. We just don't know from what level. But as Tommy said, there's always changes out there, and the funds are very short right now. It's worked out great for them so far. Eventually, the market's going to turn. Eventually, they're going to cover. The issue is we don't know from what level. Price is unpredictable, so you want to defend your balance sheet. And if you're making sales or have made sales, at some point you might want to consider getting back in there with some call options, as the case may be. But every year is different. This one will have us some surprises for us. I'm certain over these last 6 months, just as every single year we've ever watched commodities.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Tommy, you still?
Yes, sir.
This is Tommy Grisafi and Brian basting from Advanced Trading One Back Roads of Illinois. The risk of trading for the futures and options can be substantial.